Hear that? Nothing? Me neither. But that's the perfect spot for your company's name to step into the spotlight. Become an underwriter for As You Mic It and let every episode be your curtain call. Slip a note to podcast@pashakespeare.org for more information.
I should put my glasses on.
No, that'll ruin the shot.
Welcome back to As You Mic It, the official podcast of Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival. I'm your host, Jason King-Jones, Artistic Director here at PSF. As always, I'm joined by my fantastic co-hosts, Director of Education and Community Engagement, Kim Carson.
Hello.
And Associate Producer, Connie Behringer.
Hello.
Our 2025 summer series, Undiscovered Countries, invites us to unpack fresh perspectives and new frontiers. Together, we'll be examining the different threads that weave together our season. Today, we're going to be embracing the spirit of discovery by exploring what lies behind our preconception in an episode that we're calling Outside the Lines. We'll be looking at our own preconceived notions, stereotypes, personal behaviors that we raise, and see how it resonates with our season lineup. And we'll probably have a few surprises and maybe even a couple laughs along the way. In Act 2, we'll be sharing our conversation with Akeem Davis. He's not only an award-winning performer and theater artist, he's also the director of our upcoming production of A Raisin in the Sun. And bonus, you'll get to see him play Alcibiades in Timon of Athens with Extreme Shakespeare this summer. We'll be hearing from him in a bit, but first, let's jump right into Act 1, The Round Table. Act 1, The Round Table. A major theme in our season lineup is an exploration of the limitations of boundaries. Whether literal or metaphoric, each of these productions that we'll be doing this season tackles the concepts of the limitation. What we're going to be doing in today's roundtable is have a bit of a conversation about how the season productions all kind of like reference this theme of outside the lines. We think about boundaries and breaking boundaries. Each of these plays tackles that theme in a different way. And so we're going to have a bit of a conversation about that. Let's actually start with Hamlet. The theme for the whole season is Undiscovered Countries, and that comes from Shakespeare's famous To Be or Not to Be monologue. And one of the things that he's addressing is to be or not to be, to live or not to live, to follow through on the act of avenging my father's death, which will probably bring about my own demise. Do I do that or do I not do that? And if I do, it's most likely going to be my death. And what's on the other side of that? So he's really contemplating his own boundaries, his boundaries of what's appropriate for him, whether he can or should even commit murder. You know, his father, this is something that I've been thinking about. We were talking about it earlier. You know, his father was a great warrior who had the name Hamlet. I mean, he doesn't even have his own name. He has his dad's name. And he has to kind of live up to this this reputation. And his Hamlet, you know, his father Hamlet, you know, smote the sledded Pollux on the ice. And, you know, we see him as a ghost wearing his military gear and when he was triumphant in battle. And then when we see Hamlet, we see a college kid, you know, who went to Wittenberg. He's not his father. He's not meeting those kinds of expectations of what we think a, you know, kind of like battle-hardened king is supposed to be, who defeated Fortinbras, took over land. And what's now being asked of him by this ghost that he thinks is actually his father, certainly looks and talks like his father, is to avenge him for this murder that his uncle committed on his father. But that means that he has to become a killer. And that seems to be a boundary and a barrier for Hamlet.
Yeah, because he doesn't have that practice of being a warrior. He doesn't know how to take a life.
Yeah, he seems to be pretty skilled at fencing, but that's only because we learn in Act 5 that he's been practicing.
Right.
At school.
Right. At school.
Right,
Yeah.
at fencing, but that's a sport. And he has, and so much of the play is he going to do it or is he not going to do it? And, you know, we see those moments where he actually is there behind Claudius, dagger in his hand, ready to go. And he talks himself out of it. He talks himself out of it at that moment because he thinks that Claudius is praying. And so then he's going to send his soul to heaven. And, well, I can't do that. I want him to, you know, go to the other place. So, but there always seems to be a reason for him to do it or to not to do it. And then in Act 5, finally, all boundaries have been crossed. But at that point, his mom has been poisoned and his girlfriend has died. Like, there's just so many things that have happened at that point that he finally pushes to the other edge.
Yeah, I think in Hamlet, the boundaries are equal to expectations, right? What's expected of Hamlet, what he's supposed to do, how he's supposed to be like his father and his father's father. But I also think about it from the other side of Claudius. Claudius had these boundaries, right? He was the king's brother, not the son. He wasn't actually next in line. But while Hamlet was away, he somehow has usurped this crown and married the old king's wife, his sister-in-law, right? And so it's this interesting question of like, is crossing boundaries always a good thing, right? And maybe maybe the question is more in the means by which we do that.
Sure.
Right? That you go, well, that wasn't the way to,
Right.
to cross over your expectations, right? But Hamlet is a really interesting play to think about this question.
Yeah, and
with.
we already, sorry, Kim, we already are outside the lines when the play begins.
Yes.
Right? We're on the battlements. It's midnight. It's cold. It's spooky, and there's a ghost around.
Yeah,
right?
like we're even crossing the bounds of like the plane of existence, right? Like there's a literal ghost that comes on stage.
Exactly. That sort of metaphysical line that's crossed.
Yeah.
We know what's beyond because a ghost has appeared. There is no boundary to our mortal coil, apparently,
Right.
because there's someone coming back from the dead. But when we talked about this idea of boundaries, this notion of staying in your lane, and that whole idea where Ophelia and Hamlet can't be together.
Sure.
Because Ophelia needs to stay in her lane from a class perspective.
Right, from a class perspective and a royalty perspective, that Hamlet is of noble blood, and when he is to marry, he is supposed to marry a princess or some other royalty from some other country, not the daughter of the king's advisor Polonius. Yeah, that's a relationship that should not be allowed to exist. Yeah, definitely. For Ophelia's example, she's looking to Gertrude and Claudius, and they got together pretty quickly after King Hamlet was killed or died mysteriously in his sleep in his garden. So it seems like, again, we're in this situation in Denmark where something is rotten in the state. But for Ophelia, perhaps maybe it is okay. Maybe we're in a different kind of a place now because we've already crossed the lines in other ways.
Oh, that's an interesting thought, that Ophelia has this hope for this relationship because we're already outside of our expectations.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that's interesting.
For a play like Hamlet, which has a huge reputation, where everybody knows a little bit about the play, and probably what they know is it's got a lot of lines in it. For those of us who are, who love a little bit of trivia, we know that like the lines for the character of Hamlet actually exceed the total number of lines for the Scottish play.
Oh my goodness.
Like Hamlet is verbose. Now, of course, Lindsay Smiling, our director for Hamlet, has cut the play down. We also know that we were doing that and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead in the same day, so we also have to cut that thing for time. But that's but it is a play where there's a lot of discussion, a lot of thinking. Hamlet has a lot to consider and a lot to unpack mentally on what the next steps are. And he also crosses a barrier very quickly, and then we will move on. But he crosses that barrier by like inviting the players, the acting company, the players come into town and they're going to perform. And he asks them to perform the murder of Gonzaga. But then he's like, hey, can we color outside the lines? Can you do a few lines that I'm going to write? And so that we can do this similar play, but with these slight changes. And we're going to color out outside the lines so that then I can use this as a way to test to see whether my uncle Claudius is guilty, because he's going to watch a play that is the very story of what he did to my father, or the ghost told me. And of course, then that happens, and I'll take the ghost word for £1,000.
Right.
Right. But because Hamlet colored outside the lines there too, he was able to finally have a test and have some proof of what the ghost told him, which then propels him into action. So I had mentioned Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Perhaps we should talk a little bit about that very briefly. I think one of the fun things about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, the boundaries for those two characters they are bound by the text of Hamlet. They're bound by the theater space in which they inhabit. They don't exist without that play. And in fact, what we see them when we see them flipping that coin that keeps flipping to heads and keeps flipping to heads is what's next. And as they try to process who they are, where they are, when they are, what kind of plane of existence are they even on, it's not until the players arrive. It's not until the scene that that coin finally flips to tails that then the characters from Hamlet also appear, and suddenly they know what they're doing and they're in the scenes, and they have lines, they have motivation, they have scene partners to work off of. They suddenly understand why they're there, and then those scenes go away, and then they're left alone on stage, kind of stuck in the bounds of this container that is the theater, trying to figure out what to do next. So it is a play very much about the lines and whether or not they can ever go outside of those lines.
They're restricted literally by the script.
Yeah.
Right? It sort of is a play that kind of steps out of itself in that way, or is kind of meta in that way, is that these characters, like you said, they don't exist outside of the script of Hamlet, but here they are put in this place in front of the audience, and they don't exist outside of the stage. They're bound by fate in a way, in that way as well. They learn that they're going to die at the end. Spoiler alert. And I mean, the play's been around for a while, but like they know this and there's nothing they can do about it, or seemingly there's nothing they can do about it, nothing they do about it, because they're bound by the rules of the play.
Yeah, I mean, Act 1 and 2, they're bound by the stage. Every time they think they're trying to run, I'm going to run off stage, and then there's always a reason that keeps them back on, a question, an idea, or maybe even a fear of what's on the other side of those footlights or the other side of the wings. And then in Act 3, they're bound by the ship that they're on. And they can't really get off without jumping into the abyss, literally.
When we have those boundaries, we learn best when we have to push up against those boundaries and go beyond those boundaries.
Yeah.
But Rosencrantz and Guildenstern can't escape the boundaries that they have.
Right.
They're stuck on this stage. They're stuck in this script. And ultimately, they can't grow as characters because they're stuck and they can't push beyond the walls and the boundaries that have been set up for them.
Absolutely. Kim, typically, in your experience as an actor, when you're given a role, how do you fill that backstory? How do you color outside the lines? Typically, when you've kind of given a role and you have your script and you know what kind of happens scene by scene.
I think each role it's different for me, right? Sometimes just what's in the script, the lines that I'm given, the given circumstances that I'm getting given literally from the playwright is all I need. That's what we need to tell the story. But then with other roles, you want to have more specificity than that, right? For yourself as an actor, but also it's going to enrich the performance and all of that stuff. So you always start with what's in the play, right? You always start with what are your lines? What do people say about you, the other characters? What do you say about other characters? What do you say about yourself? You're looking at the stage direction, all of that sort of stuff. But then sometimes the playwright will leave stuff ambiguous. Or sometimes the playwright will hint at stuff and you need to fill in the blanks and the details for yourself in order to have that rich in your imagination, right? So it's interesting if we're talking about a play like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, because I question, would it be helpful for these actors to fill in that backstory? I don't think so.
Neither
for
do
this
I.
particular
No.
play. I think it's literally fog. Everything other than what's happening in that each moment is just fog, like the abyss, right? I'm stealing that word from you. That beyond the stage, beyond the wings, right, is nothingness for them. And so for me, if I were doing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, I would let exactly what's there be all I know.
Absolutely. It's funny. I had a conversation with Mabood, who's playing Guildenstern, and he was like, "How do I need to prepare for this? What do I need to do in order to like be ready for this? What kind of homework do I need to bring in?" And I was like, "You just know that I hired you to play Guildenstern, so I need you to bring all of yourself and then read this text a lot, and then maybe get in touch with Sean Close, who's playing Rosencrantz, and that's about it. But like, you don't need to go beyond that because that's what this play requires. But I do think that it's part of the design of the piece to push against the kind of Chekhovian or Tennessee Williams or Miller or what have you, those playwrights who were encouraging a kind of rich, deep backstory, really fleshing out the bones of a character with all the other back history so that you could walk into a scene fully informed. And I think one of the things that Stoppard has as a thesis to this play is this is the script. You don't exist beyond this. And these two characters, these minor characters of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, have no other history. They only exist in the script. And then what happens if you are trying to find out what's happening on the outside of that script. I think that's one of the things that he plays with in this script.
I think the difference between Hamlet itself and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, right? Like if I were playing Gertrude in Hamlet, I would want to know, what was that relationship like with Hamlet, who's dead? How did I get with Claudius? All of those things, I would want to fill in all of that for myself. Versus in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, no, it's just what is, right? Yeah.
Well, so we've covered Hamlet, we've covered Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. We do want to touch on a couple other ones in the time that we do this round table. Timon of Athens, Shakespeare's lesser known piece that we're going to be doing as Extreme Shakespeare with Greg Woods playing Timon of Athens. It is a play that is a bit of an allegory. It's a biting social satire. It delves into wealth and class and friendships. Curious about what we could think about what kind of social walls that people build around themselves with Timon of Athens.
For myself, when I think about what's going on with Timon, he starts out as a very open, almost boundless character. He has this kindness and this generosity to a fault. And people take advantage of him so much. This poor guy. And as time progresses and he realizes the false friends that he surrounded himself with, and he goes out into the wilderness. Because of that, now he has those walls. I don't trust you. I don't trust any of this anymore. I don't trust what's happening, and all of you are a bunch of liars. And he throws those walls back up again.
Well, he chooses to go outside the lines of his society, right? He leaves entirely. He was the center point of so many people's lives because he was the locus of generosity. He got people out of scrapes. He helped people get married if they needed to with some extra money. There were so many people that came to him for help. And during that time, he wasn't even aware of the fact that he was also, of course, asking for a loan here or there to cover expenses. He doesn't realize until it's too late that he has no more assets. He's given everything away by the time we see him. And so he has nothing. And then when it's time for him to turn to his friends, the people who thinks is his friends, to help him out in his time of need, there's no one there.
They say nope.
No. Yeah. So what why not? Why not just if these are the bounds that I'm living by, I'm getting out of here. And so finally I see society for what it is, and it's terrible. and all of you are awful people. And so he becomes the misanthrope that Apomantus, who's the first misanthrope that we meet, is just warns him about this society. He's like, I don't know, you're wrong, Apomantus. You're wrong. And then he's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to then compete to be more of a misanthrope than even you are.
Think about how sad the whole story is. It's not, we're not playing it as a tragedy. We're not playing it as, it is more of a satire, a commentary on society and how it is, and the lines that are drawn as we go through our processes. Yeah,
and I think that if you don't know this play, I think that a satire for us is more of a palatable way in. But I will also say this play kind of reminds me of as Shakespeare kind of working on similar themes that he kind of works out a little bit more in King Lear. Of a person who was at the apex of his power and chooses to give it away in a way, and dividing his property into 3 to each of his daughters, and all they have to do is publicly tell them how much they love him, and then he will divide the land. But what he's of course unaware of is that people don't love him as for who he is; they love him for what he has, and that's that theme comes up a lot in this play as well. So I think if you have an affinity or an understanding for King Lear, that's a good filter to kind of prepare yourself a little bit for Timon of Athens and know that it's set in a different time. But I think that that's a very similar kind of story to think about when you're thinking about this play. Kim, when we think about Penelope, when we think about a person who has some boundaries around them that she has to navigate, where does your mind go with that?
So with Penelope, right, she's waiting for her husband to return from the wars. She has all these suitors who have set up camp in her house, and it is expected, again, those expectations being our boundaries, right, that a woman, you belong to your father until you belong to your husband. And her husband is away for 20 years. Yeah. Right? And so she's waiting and waiting and waiting for him, and these suitors are expecting her to pick her next husband. And she makes up this thing that, all right, I will choose one of you after I finish weaving this burial shroud. And so all day she works on it. She weaves at the loom. And then all night, she takes apart the work that she did during the day. So she's extending and extending and extending this choice. So that's where we find Penelope. So here's this person within these boundaries of being, she's a mother, she's a wife waiting for her husband. She's a woman in a time where women didn't really exist on their own, right? If we think about it that way. Yeah. And so society's expecting her to do a very specific thing.
Right.
And she's saying no to that very specific thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, Connie, you had talked about the idea of like the traditional wife, right? We say trad wife now a lot, right? We hear that.
That's right.
And the idea that like she's dutifully waiting for her husband, but I question when I listen to the music and read the play, I question whether it's that she's making a choice for traditionality. Is that a word? Did I just make that up?
Yeah.
Or
I'm on board with it.
Or if she's going, I'm gonna do things the way I think they should be done.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of the fascinating part about this musical, because it's looking at Penelope in a slightly different way. It's recognizing the fact that she does not know her husband at all, who's been gone for 20 years. He's coming back because she has a husband, not because she has the love of her life that's returning.
Well, and it's also a big question for her, right? Is if he's coming back, like we know the mythology, but she's setting the question as like
she doesn't know.
Yeah, she doesn't know if he's ever going to come back.
Yeah. That's right, and she's not going to know because it's not like he can text her.
Right,
it's a different time. There's no communication. Everybody's saying he's probably dead.
Right,
gone.
Right.
Yeah.
The other soldiers are all coming home.
Right.
You know, her son is a grown man now.
He doesn't
at this
know
point.
his dad at all.
Right. Yeah. And it's becoming a threat to she's also a queen and her son is a prince, and now he's old enough to be king, and his life is now more at a threat because he's a threat to all those suitors who he could take the crown and take the power away from them. There's also something about kind of outside the lines, just the style of this piece. We're taking a myth that we've all kind of known, and we all kind of, when we think about togas or whatever, and then you're going to listen to this music, and it doesn't necessarily conform to what you expect with a kind of ancient Greek mythic story.
It has a very contemporary feel.
Yeah.
Musically, but also in the lyrically, and there's some dialogue in there as well, some monologue work. It's very contemporary sounding. Yeah.
Which then makes the whole struggle that she's going through feel relatable for people today.
I think it's the brilliance of the piece.
Absolutely.
But even in that, it's funny because we're talking about breaking boundaries, right? So even in that structure, even in the way the piece has been written, it's breaking boundaries.
Right, because it's a one-woman show, except it's not quite a one-woman show.
Right.
Right. Yeah. It has a 5-piece orchestra, but it plays with the rules of what a one-person show is, and I don't quite want to give all of that away, but just know that like the piece itself continues to kind of push outside the lines too.
Yeah,
and it has that tradition of a Greek chorus without actually having a Greek chorus.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. It's really exciting, and we're very excited that we get to present that in a co-production with Theater Horizon. And those rehearsals actually for Theater Horizon start mid-April, and it'll be one of the first shows it'll be the first show that opens for us in our 2025 summer season. Speaking of early in our 2025 summer season, we also have our Play On Community Tour. It is a free show that goes around into the community, around the Lehigh Valley. This year, the show is Much Ado About Nothing. The characters in Much Ado About Nothing, there certainly is also a little bit of pushing outside the lines in this. I'm thinking particularly of Beatrice and Benedict, and the expectations of these two people who both kind of swear to like never marry. The bachelor Benedict, who mocks everyone, including his friend Claudio, who's suddenly fallen in love with Hero, and Beatrice, who is Hero's cousin, who is also sworn off men because they're all terrible. And this merry war, but that exists between Beatrice and Benedict.
I love these characters so much when I think about that. Kim, we had a great conversation earlier about Beatrice in particular and how she is sort of pushed up, and she feels the pressure and the walls of her gender role of the time.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
So much fun.
So in the play, her cousin is Hero, and Hero is wronged. On her wedding day, she gets, it's really terrible what happens to poor Hero. And Beatrice, of course, reacts to this with such anger and rage. And she feels as a woman that there's not much she can do about it, right?
Kim, do the line.
There's there's a line where she, I cannot be a man with wishing, so I must die a woman grieving.
She also says like, if I were a woman, I would tear his heart in the
Yes,
marketplace.
I would eat his heart in the marketplace.
Yeah.
She says, yes, if I were a man. Yeah, she has this whole thing, and then she asks Benedict to be a man for her sake, right?
Yeah.
And she asks him to kill Claudio, and of course Benedict and Claudio are friends, and they've been to war together and all of this. So it's complicated, right? But there are the boundaries of gender in that time period that Shakespeare really plays with in this play and calls out through this really strong female character calls out these like gender roles and being stuck in these traditional gender roles in a really interesting way, I think.
And I love it even when the two of them as confirmed bachelor and bachelorettes, when they are finally pushed to the point where now they're not bachelor and bachelorette anymore, they are still themselves, and nothing changes with their cleverness and their wit. They're still themselves, even as they changed and redefined their roles and fit more into the traditional mindset of the time. They're still as clever as ever,
witty and bantering back and forth.
Absolutely, nothing changes with them, which in a good way.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think when we think about Beatrice and Benedict, when I think of like those kinds of characters, those kinds of archetypes, there's some similarity between Petruchio and Kate in The Taming of the Shrew, which is one of Shakespeare's much earlier plays. But in that play, and of course in the title, like the goal is to tame the shrew, and that play ends with Kate, whether it's part of a scheme or not, and there's some question whether that's actually true or not, where she offers her hand to Petruchio, essentially like to put under his foot,
under his boot,
under his boot, to kind of prove that she has been tamed. And it's also a bit of a bet, but it's as opposed, and so in that there's a kind of a sense that like there was a kind of meeting of spirits between those two characters, one would hope, or it just is very misogynistic. That doesn't exist with Beatrice and Benedict. They seem to be equals when we see them, like equals at wit, equals in spirit, equals in intellect and passion, and they maintain their individual power through the play. And even at the end, it seems like they still have it, even if potentially Benedict stops Beatrice's mouth with a kiss. They seem to be equals when that play ends. I think it's one of the reasons that we love it so much, even though Claudio and Hero's relationship is the A plot, and Beatrice and Benedict is the B plot. It's the one that we care much more about too.
Jason, when you first mentioned that to me, in all of this time, I had always thought this was the Beatrice and Benedict show. And then when you told me, well, that's the B plot, I was floored. Everything about Much Ado changed for me. I'm like, how is that possible? They're the couple I love.
Yeah.
They're the couple that everyone loves. They are the couple that everyone loves. Just that the actual, like, if you were to like do a plot analysis of the rising action and the climax and all of that, it's all related really to the marriage and the issues with Claudio and Hero, and Beatrice and Benedict are kind of on the side of all of that.
What is this actually about versus like who has the main character energy?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Right. And so Beatrice and Benedict have the main character energy, and that's why we care so much about it. And that's why like there are historical documents. I can't remember exactly who it was, and forgive me if you're the historian out there, but they found an early copy of the play, and somebody had written Beatrice and Benedict next to the title of the play. So even back then, I think Much Ado About Nothing was the Beatrice and Benedict play. Yeah.
As it well should be.
As it well should be, absolutely. We are not intentionally neglecting the producers. It certainly pushes the bounds and goes outside of the lines of taste a lot. But we also are going to get to that story a little bit more in a future episode when we speak with the director of that piece, Jennifer Childs. So we're gonna also, the roundtable was going to go on pretty long if we don't do this. We're going to hold off on that one, and we're also certainly mindful of the fact that Raisin in the Sun, focuses a lot on what the boundaries are that are holding the younger family in to their circumstances and how they are pushing to get out of that. So pushing the boundaries and discovering new perspectives leads us to our very special interview. He's not only a remarkable artist, but also the director of our upcoming production of A Raisin in the Sun. Let's welcome Akeem Davis as we head into Act 2 in the Spotlight.
Now we want to bring in our director for A Raisin in the Sun, Akeem Davis. Akeem has a great history with PSF. Really excited that he's taken the lead on directing this show. So let's talk a little bit about A Raisin in the Sun. And I'd love to kind of consider a little bit about how this play really wrestles with the American dream versus American reality. And from your perspective, how does this production really spotlight the impact that systemic racism has on the younger family and their aspirations? And what are your thoughts on all of that?
Just in the title, Langston Hughes in that poem lists like 5 or 6 other ways that a dream deferred rots.
Yeah.
And we are going to do our damnedest to make sure that that is manifest in our show leading up to Does It Explode? The dream is shared IP. It's shared intellectual property, which is where our clashes come from in this country. Because as much as anybody likes to think that they have the definition of the American dream, they don't own the definition for the American experience or the lived American experience. And so, we're really going to be pointing toward the danger that the younger family has to consider for moving out of this apartment, because this is a decade of race riots based on desegregating housing. The Cicero riot, where 4,000 people showed up to burn down an apartment building because of a black family of 4 moved in. I want to bring that into the consideration of these characters, and by that way, sit that in the lap of our audience and ask them, what would you do if you were constantly faced with an advertisement of an American way of life and then a constant denial of access to it? At a certain point, what do you do? Do you succumb to it? Do you try and navigate around it? Do you try and work within it? Do you play the game to change the game? Or do you hit your head against the wall until it is bloodied? I don't know. But I do think that the family is groping for a kind of realization of their full citizenship. It just feels like in their way, maybe not Travis so much, but in their way, all of them are just wanting to get their head above water and take a big, big, big breath of air of this American dream that is like inches away from them, but galaxies away as well.
Yeah, I hear that. It makes me think about a couple of things. It makes me think of the idea. We often talk about universality in theater, but understanding the specificity and sometimes like specific experiences. Maybe they aren't universal, or the world is experienced differently by different people, and we can see a way in. But we also have to know that like some people's experiences just aren't going to be our experiences, and we can only really better understand our shared humanity and our shared responsibility as a community when we see that other people might be living the world differently than we've been able to. And the other thing that comes to mind is this, and I think we're living this right now, so much about like the macro world impacting the micro world. So much, that these larger forces outside of us that we feel like aren't so much in our control. But when you look at like individual choices that the younger family has to make, they're making these choices because the larger world is, has put them in these kinds of constraints that other Americans didn't have to face.
It's interesting to your point about divergent experiences and realities. We need to let them be okay. We at some point in history, we need to let people's specific and divergent experiences of the world be all right. I do think that the younger family, their experience is unique, but in ways it is not. August Wilson wrote a bunch. Eastern European immigrants came to places like Pittsburgh and Chicago, and they initially dealt with hard times, but they were given access to programs and they were invited into society to earn livings, and I'm using that word specifically, to earn livings. There's nothing really given to most of us in this world, in this life, and especially in this country. So you can't take away the fact that the Irish and the Italians in Chicago, that they earned what they had. That is not mutually exclusive from saying that those opportunities were not even offered to Black folks. That Black folks, they met the same tough conditions and then were suppressed into that blight, and then told that that blight was pathological and on them. So I do think the younger family is a good case for us to consider, because it's hard to even keep your dignity in situations like that. And we see a group of people who have class, but they are raging against this machine that in the 50s, we didn't have nearly as much language and scholastic armor and intellectual dissection as we do now to even be able to talk about it. You know, like, we have so much more tools now than the younger family did 70 years ago. Sure. And so we see them struggle. We see them deal and have the best that they can, but we see them struggle a lot.
You had mentioned to me that you see some parallels between Hamlet and A Raisin in the Sun, and I wonder if you can just kind of share with me what parallels are unshakable for you at this moment.
These plays are great plays, and they have massive brand and name recognition in the canon. PSF did this interesting thing of putting them together, right?
Yep.
And I had never looked at Hamlet and Raisin together.
Okay.
But when I started to, it jumped off the page that Hamlet, in a large way, is about Hamlet's father dying, that instigating this reevaluation of his relationship with the world.
Yeah.
It's certainly a conversation about mental health. It's certainly a conversation about onus and legacy and family dynamics. And so is Raisin. I mean, we start the play in proximity to Big Walter's funeral. You know, both Walter, Lee, and Benitha, and even Mama, that they are all reeling in this new reality of the absence of their patriarch. One thing that Maria and I are talking about is that I really want things to be like, I want Big Walter's chair to still be there. You know, who gets to sit in Big Walter's chair? Because those are the realities when someone that close to you dies. Walter Lee has lines specific to it. Mama, I want so much, I'm kind of losing my mind. And I think that having his father die before he has really made anything of himself, and having his son sleeping on his couch, you know, in his parents' apartment, I think these things are driving Walter as much as they're driving Hamlet. And not to make it about sons and fathers only. You know, Benitha, I was his kid too. There is, I think, a crucial dramaturgical element to this play that is the transition of Big Walter from being present to being $10,000. And what do we do with him? So that conversation is going to be really potent, and one that I'm going to probably talk about way too much in the rehearsal room. I just don't want us to lose the thread of what it would really be like if you were waking up about a week after you buried your father or your husband or your grandfather or your father-in-law, and $10,000 is on the way, like, you know, which is equal to more like $95,000 or $100,000 right now.
What it makes me think about is in Hamlet, the ghosts are manifest in how they, you know, the ghost moves about the space, right? The ghost is
Jason.
real, right? The ghost is walking the ramparts. The ghost shows up for Hamlet when he's punishing his mom, and the ghost is like, you know, remember what you're here to do. And in A Raisin in the Sun, the ghost is the $10,000. The ghost is in the house.
Yes, the ghost is in Walter Lee having to put on that stupid uniform every day. The ghost is in, unfortunately, I think about this all the time. If something were to happen to my wife or my child, would I be able to live in this home? Lena Mama is in this apartment with the life that she created with a man that is in the ground now. You know, that these things are, the ghosts have to be active and they are impactful. So not to say I see my father in my mind's eye, but obviously he sees his father in his mind's eye, you know. That's a thread that I just find super intriguing, and I'm going to be excited to be making Raisin while being able to listen and peek in on the development of Hamlet and RNG are Dead. And frankly, loving that way that it is going to elevate our approach to these, you know, what we consider modern characters. You know, they want to have the reverence and the call to action that a Hamlet does. That conversation alone, I find, just already gives the characters so much more, all of them, so much more heart and so much more resonance and so much more reason. Kim Fairbanks is so good when she's playing Mama, and when she gets to talking about the memories that her and Walter had, it is gripping. We all have unrealized dreams, whether it be from our 8-year-old self or our 20-year-old self or our 50-year-old self. Those things are still potent, even in their unrealization, like in the lack of realization. It's just, you know, when you think about King Hamlet dying, it means there needs to be a new king. It means the entire court is reshuffled and shifted. So we got to do the same kind of math for Raisin in the Sun.
Yeah. No, I think that perspective is fantastic, Akeem, and I'm so glad that you've been able to kind of see those connections, and I think that it's going to be a great opportunity as well for our audiences to experience these plays and let them all kind of talk to each other in ways that they might not if they weren't all kind of being programmed around the same time.
Absolutely.
It's been great to have you here as one of our guests for As You Mic It. The insights continue to resonate, and you're making me more and more excited about the summer we have ahead.
Alrighty, my pleasure.
What a great conversation with Akeem Davis. His passion for storytelling and his commitment to exploring through societal questions really captures the heart of this season's theme. Now, let's keep the momentum going as we head into Act 3. A peek behind the curtain.
A peek behind the curtain.
A peek behind the curtain. We're going to share a bit more about the backstage process, the creative collaborations, and how we bring these boundary-breaking productions to life. Today on A Peek Behind the Curtain, let's take a closer look at our annual offering of Extreme Shakespeare.
It's so extreme.
It's so extreme. Okay, Extreme Shakespeare. What Extreme Shakespeare is a fancy way of saying something called original practices. Well, what are original practices? Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival is one of several Shakespeare theater companies in the United States and all over that take the opportunity to examine what it might have been like for Shakespeare's own theater company to have put on a production. So what we do is we kind of understand a few things about history. So let's go there. We understand that Shakespeare's acting troupe was made up of a relatively permanent company of actors. We understand that many of those actors were all kind of playing different kinds of key kind of roles. There was the Burbage who played the lead roles. There was somebody who played the clowns, and the clowns might have changed from time to time. The roles of the women were often played by younger men who maybe teenage boys who were kind of growing up into the company. And each of them kind of had their own parts. We believe that Shakespeare, like one of his most famous roles was even playing the ghost of King Hamlet, that he was very famous at kind of playing the ghost in that. So they all kind of had their own kinds of types of roles that they would play. And Shakespeare would write given his understanding of the different actors that he had in the company and the strengths that they could provide, whether it was the clown and what kind of humor the clown did, or whether it was the lead tragedian actor or the lovers couples or what have you. He was writing to based on the strengths of the particular actors. So we know that the actors had a repertoire of up to maybe even like 20 plays that they could do on any given month. We know that given the fact that there was a competition for attention and there were other theater companies that were performing alongside on the South Bank in London, that they were competing for attention. They were also competing against the bear baiting rank or other entertainment. So they were competing for attention, and they were always kind of competing for and to make the dollars. So they had to kind of be fresh with their content. So Shakespeare they weren't only doing Shakespeare's plays, but they were doing plays from other writers as well. So this company of whether it was when they were the Lord Chamberlain's men or when they kind of got underneath the protection of King James, they became the King's men. They were a company that had a repertoire of plays under their belt ready to go. So these actors they had a lot of lines in their head. Nobody ever asked these guys, how'd you learn all those lines? Because they had so many lines at the go that it wasn't, it was commonplace to see actors who could quote long pieces of text just based on memory. So they had, these actors would come into a rehearsal process, which was maybe a day. They would know what their particular lines were. They would spend that brief amount of time working on like the big choreographed scenes, whether they were the big dances or the big fights or things that would involve a lot of bodies on stage. And other than that, the actors would have to listen to each other. None of the actors really had a full script. There was a prompter backstage who would have one copy of the full text, and they would probably have a cheat sheet of like, here's what's happening in these scenes, just so you kind of know what the rundown is from the top of the show until the end. And there were probably a few people backstage to help make some costume changes and things like that. The actors themselves had a roll of parchment that would have their lines and then maybe up to like 3 words of the cue that would precede their lines. And so they would have a roll that would be their lines, their cues, their lines, their cues, and that's all they would have. So what they would do is they would hand each of these actors their roles, which was their roll of parchment, and that's the role they would play. And they were responsible for all their lines and their cues. Then they would have this cheat sheet backstage of what scenes that they would walk into, come on stage, stand there, wait for their cue, and listen for those 3 words. As soon as those 3 words, they would bang right into their text. Mm-hmm. And they would do their text while somebody else was listening and waiting for their cue. So there's this amazing exercise in attention on stage, these actors just waiting for their lines. So what we do with PSF is we collect a group of actors. They come in with their lines all learned. If they want to read the whole script, they're welcome to. I'm not going to give them just their own lines. That's a lot of it. That's a lot of work just to hand off parchments. But some companies have done that, where they've actually just handed out the original parts. But the actors come in with their lines learned, and then in about 3 days, without a director or without any other designers, they decide the staging. They work together for the safety of the fight choreography and whatever, and they put the play together. Just like maybe an actor manager would maybe move some people about the stage, and as actors, they will select their own costumes, just like with the Elizabethan company, they would have a stock of costumes and they'd have a stock of props. And so they would just pull the things that they have, and then a play is made in a few days. And so that's our Extreme Shakespeare. Kim, what's your experience with Extreme Shakespeare?
I've never done it.
You've never done it?
No, I've never done an Extreme Shakespeare.
Wow.
Here or anywhere else. No. The only time that I've ever done Shakespeare, it was very traditional, like how we do things now traditionally. Yeah. You know, director, designers, nice long rehearsal period, all that good stuff. So the idea of the Extreme Shakespeare, I get this giddy feeling when I think about it, because just the prospect of it is really exciting.
It is. It is like putting somebody up at the very top of a very difficult ski slope and just hoping that they have the skills to make it down safely. And it's a whole company at the same time, all kind of going together. Yeah. It's exhilarating. I will say that, when I was brought in and interviewing for the job as artistic director back in 2022, I was like, what is this? This seems like a bad idea. Seems like a lot of chaos could happen. And then I remember having conversations with people who had a history here at Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival and the Extreme Shakespeare. And from our staff to audience members are just like, yeah, we love it. Mm-hmm. Audience members love it. The actors love it. And so now I'm a true believer. I think that there's so much fun in watching this company kind of come together, and we bring good artists together. We started conversations this year with Greg Wood, who's playing Timon of Athens. I was having conversations with him back in September, saying like, hey, would you be interested in coming back and joining us? And then he was like, hey, I'd like to kind of work on making the cut. And I'm like, great, Greg, you work on making the cut, because of course folks, we never do every single word in a Shakespeare play. Otherwise, we would be here for much longer every night. These plays can last up to 4 hours, even more. Hamlet could even last even longer. So the plays always are judicious. They are cut for time, sometimes for content, and a lot for clarity. And so Greg Wood has kind of taken on the actor-manager role with us this year for Timon of Athens and made the cut. And then it's up to me working with Greg to put a company together, to find the right actors based on the right types of roles. And now those actors have all been hired and scripts are being sent out, and it's going to be their job to come in with their lines learned. Then they're going to come in on a Friday, and by Tuesday night, we're doing an invited dress rehearsal, and by Wednesday, we've got a paid audience.
Right. There's no tech rehearsal, which surprised me when I looked at that. They're not doing any kind of fancy lighting, or they're not doing any kind of fancy blocking or anything. They're doing what they're doing.
Yeah,
we're going with it.
Yeah, we have a resident assistant lighting designer for the season, and typically we tap that person and ask them to build 3 or 4 basic looks, maybe a day look or a night look, a big wide open space, or maybe a couple of different general looks, but that's it. And then they're just look 1, look 2, just so that we can have some variation in the light. The set tends to be what set was there from the previous show. We may make some changes. Last year for Cymbeline, we did have to have some meetings because Clotton gets his head cut off, and that was Akeem Davis. And so we're like, okay, we need to get a head for Akeem. So we actually brought him in early and cast his head so we could have a head for that body. And then we needed to make sure that the props department had the costumes and the props, so an appropriately sized Akeem, headless Akeem.
Well, and it was done on the Winnie the Pooh set.
Yeah, it was it was done with some changes that we changed a little bit. We hid the door, but yeah, it was done in a very foresty space, which also fit.
Woods.
It fit with the kind of storybook aesthetic we were doing with Cymbeline as well.
My brain, this has nothing to do with this conversation, but my brain keeps thinking about that whole play within a play. And when you talk about the original practices, there's that meta commentary that happens with, you look at Hamlet and there's the play within a play and their company. And we can kind of see what the original practices looks like from the content of that. But then, you think about the rude mechanicals and how many times did Shakespeare use this device in his work, and how much of our understanding of original practices do we get from watching this sort of meta commentary that he has in all of his plays?
Well, they certainly do echo, and it's funny. I was kind of going through the whole canon, and I don't claim to be a Shakespeare scholar, and I know that I'm probably missing some, but the two that are best known are what you just brought up: the play within the play in Midsummer Night's Dream, and and Hamlet. And there's a real famous play within a play from a play called Thomas Kyd that's called The Spanish Tragedy, which a lot of people say was Shakespeare was pulling some ideas from in order to do Hamlet. In fact, some even say that there was a version of Hamlet that Thomas Kyd had written with the play Hamlet, and that Shakespeare may have even stolen some of that. We don't know. But what we do know is in the Spanish Tragedy, the hero is a father named Geronimo, and his son had been murdered. And he puts together a play and casts the people that he understands are the murderers into the play. And in the play, he kills the murderers. So the play becomes a total, a mousetrap plot for him to actually get revenge on the people who killed his son. Shakespeare, I think, is a little bit smarter in how he weaves all of that. But what's also interesting about both Midsummer Night's Dream and Hamlet is there's a style of play in those two pieces where somebody tells you the plot of the show and a dumb show acts it out.
Yep.
And then we see the actual dialogue of the play, and we see the events that happen. That it happens both in the Midsummer Night's Dream, where Quince basically does a whole prologue, and all the actors kind of step out and show what they're going to do, and then they do the play. And then it happens in The Murder of Gonzago, or The Mousetrap in Hamlet, which I also find interesting because there isn't a version of that in Shakespeare's plays. There is some argument that the entirety of The Taming of the Shrew is a giant play within a play meant to entertain this drunken guy that shows up, Christopher Sly, that they kind of dress him up and have this guy dress up to pretend to be his wife, and they make him believe he's royalty, and then they put on this whole play of The Taming of the Shrew in order to entertain Christopher Sly, although that plot device seems to kind of get weak and kind of fall away before the end of the play. Well, that's your bit of theater history for the day. And as far as original practices are concerned, so original practices, you've got a company with their lines learned. You've got a stock costumes and props that the actors have some freedom to pull from, and they do that here at PSF. We tend to bring in somebody to help make sure that the fights are safe. We do have a fight director to kind of make sure that if there are fights, they're safe, although we don't expect to have a lot happening in Timon of Athens, just given the nature of that particular script. And then a lot of freedom for the actors to work together collaboratively to tell the story. And the actors find that opportunity to tell the story themselves and to act and direct themselves around very empowering. And so that's one of the reasons why we keep doing it. And we'd love to use that opportunity to highlight some of Shakespeare's lesser known plays, which is why Timon of Athens this year, last year Cymbeline, the year before that it was Henry IV Part 2, plays that might not get done with a director and a full time to really rehearse all of that. We put in the Extreme, in that slot of the Extreme, as a way for us to continue to tell Shakespeare stories and just to tell it in a way that we think can be really invigorating both for the artists and the audience. And so that is our peek behind the curtain.
A peek behind the curtain.
All right. Well, we've reached the end of this leg of our journey into Undiscovered Countries. Huge thanks to Akeem Davis, and Chuck Gloman, and Jarrett Brown, and the entire TV film department of DeSales University, and to all of you for listening. We'd love to hear from you. Whether you have a question, have an idea for the show, or just want to send us a glowing positive affirmations, you can reach us at podcast@pashakespeare.org. If you want to catch our productions at PSF, get your tickets at pashakespeare.org or call the box office at 610-282-WILL. That's 610-282-9455. Until next time, for Kim and Connie, I'm Jason King Jones, reminding you that breaking down boundaries often reveals our greatest truths. Thanks for listening, and see you at Labuda.
Thank you for listening to As You Might It, a Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival presentation recorded on the beautiful campus of DeSales University. Our music is by Cedric Lamar, with hosts Jason King Jones, Kim Carson, and Connie Behringer. For more information on our summer theater series, giving opportunities, tickets, and more, visit pashakespeare.org. Be sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you at Labuda.
Behind every standing ovation is a network of patrons who know that theater changes lives. With tickets funding only half the cost, PSF counts on contributions to produce world-class theater, cultivate new audiences, and nurture future generations of artists. Give today at pashakespeare.org/support. Great theater is a collaboration both on stage and off.